So, being a research student enrolled into a PhD program at Erasmus University more than a decade earlier, and then doing a research master's degree as well as an MPhil from Kaiser University, uh, I would explain some few things that will establish this point of view that how ignorance could be representing the pedagogy and learning techniques, and how simple it is to understand. At the same time, acquisition of knowledge, and then representing a level of ignorance. And I mean, it's very simple. The world of specialization, where somebody is an economist, somebody is a physicist, somebody is a mathematician, somebody is a statistician, somebody is a biochemist, somebody is a medical doctor, somebody is an engineer, somebody is a computer scientist. So within these formal education disciplines, you're specialized even into more specific subject lines. For example, within economics, there is specialization in monetary economics, development economics, fiscal economics, econometrics, or there could be, you could be expert in policy, economic policy making, or project management. And I'm just talking about, or industrial economics, you could be specialized into, or you could be specialized into the theories of leadership. So what I'm saying is that knowledge creation is not only a complex phenomenon, but it could represent simultaneously what is not known and how the frameworks should be understood, and know that there is a whole ocean of knowledge that is yet to be understood. For example, I did my 2 research degrees with a master's program. One is Master in Philosophy from Kaiser University in Economics, and then one Master of Arts in Economics for Development. One this Economics for Development I did from Erasmus University, International Institute of Social Studies. And these are research degree programs. What research degree programs would mean is that I will undertake a research thesis. I will write a research thesis. For MPhil program, the time period was 1 year, and for MA it was 6 months. What I would be doing was that my specialization or my subject focus was on financial economics, whereas in MPhil I analyzed stock markets, while in my MA I analyzed the financial liberalization aspects for a Pakistani economy, and therefore could build complex non-linear time series based econometric models to understand the linkages between economic development and financial sector, while focusing on the banking sector and employing various definitions of money, which could be currency in circulation or which could be demand deposits, and then also including interest rates, deposit rates especially. So, but what are the constraints? For example, I added to knowledge and value to economics by only looking at very particular aspects. For example, in MPhil, it was Karachi Stock Exchange, and there are hundreds of stock exchanges across the world, and like New York Stock Exchange is one of the most thriving stock exchanges. London, being the financial capital of the world, would then represent its secondary markets, while at the same time there is time variation to the data as well. For example, I did my MPhil started my MPhil in 1998 and completed it in 2001, and it's more than 2 decades. There's new data, there are new mathematical frameworks to analyze the data, and there are thousands of stocks enrolled in one single stock market, whereas what I focus was on Karachi Stock Exchange and stock market returns and stock market volumes, whereas there could be analysis done on each specific stock of a company. It could be that those companies could be have many sectors. It could be financial sector, it could be banking sector, it could be telecommunications, it could be information technology, it could be digital technology, social media, or it could be automobile industry. So now you understand, once you venture into a certain research theme to then specialize into a certain area in economics by writing a detailed research thesis, what you are doing is you are trying then simultaneously adding knowledge to a very specific area, but as well as would naturally know that what methodology and frameworks should be adopted to then understand a lot of unknowns, a lot of things which research could still analyze and then add to economic theory. Same is the case with PhD. I use cross-section methodology. By taking, the cross-section would comprise all the countries of the world, identified into developed and developing countries. But at the same time, I use perception-based data developed by World Bank economist Kaufman, the institutional data, rule of law, government effectiveness, regulatory quality, while at the same time the controls were globalization and especially level of exports and imports that is made in the, for a national economy across the world, but also specific trade policy measures like export taxes or for example tariffs. But at the same time, I would include social sector by taking different measures that would define education, quality of education, and how attainment of levels of education, and then would use or improvise on a model, empirical model developed by Harvard University professor Danny Roderick, which was such an interesting model, which was helped me develop simultaneous information model, whereby instrumental analysis was also being carried out, a complex instrumental analysis by finding pure exogenous variables. And then what did I learn? I would add value to the literature, but my empirical methodology is again constrained with certain specific frameworks, whereas there is panel data methodologies, there is time series methodologies, and then then there could be microanalysis, there could be meso-analysis, there could be microanalysis, and then analyzing institutional frameworks, regulatory quality experience, or effectiveness of monetary and fiscal policy for each nation state, and then for each government would then be something which I could guess that I need to analyze for. Maybe it would take me decades for each to focus on each country and then start understanding, while at the same time countries are identified as higher income country, middle income countries, low income countries. It was yet the PhD degree would, you can understand, would yet be just another learning experience. And then you start your practical life where I'm an academic, my research is oriented towards academic research, and some of it is directed towards policy making, while at the same time at the level of the theory and theoretical frameworks, I could then write a lot of books whereby I would then try to argue that individuals identifications, social identifications, political identifications would broaden economic horizons, economic frameworks, but at the same time adopting an approach which could be understanding how culture could be quantified or could be understood and then linked to economic behaviors, both at micro level and at the macro level. How leadership would be understood through the processes of democracy, or for a larger set of developing and developed nations, how leadership could be understood for China, for example, while at the same time understanding that the data for China, both micro and macro, would suggest that higher growth rates of China has led to decrease in poverty, significant decrease in poverty level, while at the same time India, which is a democracy, will also follow through institutions of international governance by trade liberalization and financial liberalization, will also have a decade-long decent economic growth rate, higher than 6%. At the same time, East Asia would use trade protection to then develop their industrial sector, especially the automobile industry, to then benefit from globalization and international trade. I mean, these are all statements, these are all basic frameworks and knowledge aspects which you with refined expertise in research frameworks would allow you to then understand the limitation of the analysis and what could be contributed in the future, while at the same time it could be quantitative perspective or it could be qualitative perspective. And mostly the knowledge base of economics is available through quantification of perceptions, behaviors that could be economic, political, social, or even legal. And then the world of technology would then have its own meaning. For example, through commercial markets, through commercialization, for example, through research and development, promoting creativity and innovation, technology aspect is being covered. But at the same time, it would be explained so nicely with capitalism, whereas technology is an outcome of investing in capital by the entrepreneurs, and it's linked with financial markets from where the resources come through, and then how technology firms would then practice their business strategies to then allow for higher labor productivity and capital productivity to then add value to capitalism, whereby technology firms could address the qualms of Karl Marx and socialist analysis, whereby socialism would be created on the premise that labor, unskilled labor especially, is being exploited by the market system, and then and linking markets with the society, and then finding a larger framework where the government would contribute to economic stability, economic prosperity of the citizens, as well as have institutional systems of governance to then promote business competitiveness. Now, see, I mean, theoretically, at the theoretical framework, I can identify a lot of aspects that could be understood in economics. But then, for each aspect, there can be a plethora of issues, or it could be ocean of knowledge base that needs to be understood through empirical data analysis, or by adding value to then logically understanding the processes and their micro and macro dimensions. So that's when you that's what I meant. To be a PhD, you're trained, and then what you do is that you try to understand the unknowns, but then you have to be trained to then identify those frameworks. Once you identify the frameworks, then you can add value to knowledge creation. And a PhD would really train you, because PhD really asks you to innovatively contribute at least something new to the literature. It could be social science literature, it could be science literature, it could be literature which could guide policymakers. So there could be action research, there could be theoretical research foundations, or there could be empirical research which use data analysis, and with the advent of big data, econometric models, mathematical algorithms that are used in social sciences have become more and more complex, and thereby many statistical softwares would be adopted and understood, and that would give you a guide for the framework how digital world through complex algorithms, or how artificial intelligent language model like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot would be developed, and certain nonlinear arithmetic source codes were identified. While at the same time, basic understanding in social sciences that the frameworks of research would work through time dimensions, and there is cross-section. Cross-section is spatial variation. Spatial variation that could be geographical, that could be social identification. For example, social identification would mean very cross-section variation, as what are the gender dynamics, what are the age groups, what are the income levels, what are the education levels, and then for those cross-section identification, you collect data for at least many years. Where it could be it could be a certain government for 5 years with a large cross-section data, or it could be many countries that could be representing cross-section, both developing countries or only developing countries, and then finding the patterns, finding the linear and non-linear patterns for a decade of policy, or it could be what happened to economics after the advent of new liberalization. New liberalism, that would mean that understanding contemporary globalization, financial liberalization, and trade liberalization through the not only the rules and policies of World Trade Organization and International Monetary Fund and its assistance to the developing countries, but how governments have behaved, how markets have behaved, and how citizens have responded to then add value to economic productivity. And that's, there are so many aspects, but the key is to then have this framework, this research framework that would allow you to understand what are the constraints, data constraints, and what could be the possibilities once you have data. For big data is something which might more comprehensively explain any of the economic processes, not only for the developed and developing countries, but for specifically developed or developing countries, or for developing countries, or for one specific country. For example, it could be understanding policy making, government policy and its effectiveness for only Pakistan, or for only India or China, or any of the country in Africa or Latin America. So that's, it means that while you're after formal education and a PhD, you're not only trained to then add value to the literature, and with a lot of perspective, theoretical perspective, policy making perspective, research design perspective, but also with perspective of creating data dynamics, using survey methodologies to collect new data. But especially it is so worthwhile and it is so beneficial to collect micro data, and micro data could be for city level, or it could be for town level, or it could be for for one single market. I mean, one can do a great economic analysis which have micro aspects to it for a local market or a local society or a local town or urban or rural locality, and using the same research frameworks and your theoretical background and training in a certain specific economic discipline, which could be development economics, to then add value to research. And that's how you supervise your students if you are an academic. Or for policy making, it would all be about decision making, and then having a large and scientific repository of perception-based data, not only for the society but for the markets as well, and for how international political economy is formulated and diplomacy is followed for each specific country, and then how rules and regulations are defined by international governance institutions. So you understand, there's so much that you would know, that you can know and then add value or create knowledge, and of course limitation of individual exercise, or to do a great research, or then for example, I have written a lot of books, maybe 100 books, but then 1,000 people can sit together, make a team of 10, and could write 100 books within a month. 1,000 really learned people. I mean, there are millions of more learned people, more qualified people, more experienced people, more intelligent people than me. And then, of course, the young students, being a PhD and teaching in a university, I know that the youth is really talented. They are so intelligent. Their academic orientation is so balanced, and they could confidently add greater value to research quality and new knowledge creation than me, for example, because they have a large exposure, they have a digital world to understand the world and learn about the world from the very early childhood, and their expression, presentation skills, their computer skills, computer knowledge, they are all more refined and defined since their schooling. So there's not only hope, there's not only the message of knowledge creation within the framework of finding your ignorance to then understand what really is the world of knowledge all about, and how much one can really be understand at individual capacity, or a research group capacity, or an institutional capacity, what can be understood, and the data is always changing. There's intergenerational perceptions that needs to be understood. There are circumstances. For example, a government can be focusing on inclusive growth strategy, while at the same time social progress needs to be understood for that government and for the forthcoming governments. So there are a lot of things which needs to be known, and that's how PhD would open up you to that horizon, this ocean, this vast ocean, where you can, with your specialized expertise, you can continue adding value, and still you would be ignorant about a lot of other subjects and disciplines, and therefore for that I have adopted a multidisciplinary strategy whereby I am using cultural frameworks and religious frameworks to then add value to economics by guiding the frameworks that would be more resilient, more responsive to noble human values and behavior. And that's why I have created a more robust framework that would connect society with markets or society with the government, while at the same time keeping my economic expertise and focusing and directing my economic expertise that I've developed after a PhD and after having a lot of professional experience, to then add a very specific area specific contribution that is in most terms are still at a basic level, at the level of developing a framework and understanding a certain economic theory, while at the same time there is so much economics that I don't know about. And of course, being an economist, you can easily guess that I have no idea what biology, specialization in biology and knowledge creation in biology would mean, or chemistry would mean, or engineering would mean, or medical science would mean, or computer science would mean. But I have a general perspective and a general knowledge that could allow me to add value to economic arguments by making certain statements. Earlier I was, you could write a page, then I'm able to write few pages, and now I can able to write a book, while at the same time the level of arguments and knowledge